What can we learn from elite bodybuilders? I did a video recently on Serge Debray. I'm a big fan of his training style, and I think there's quite a lot of interest in what we can learn from elite bodybuilders. The intention of the video was not to get everyone to train like Serge, because he does monster volume. Even amongst the high volume trainees, his is right up there. But I think there are lessons that we can learn from that. My own training style, my own training recommendations, I've given many times. I have a playlist if you want to check it out, and it's called Hypertrophy Fundamentals. But I think we can learn a lot from Serge, and we can learn a lot from elite bodybuilders, whether that's things we should do, whether that's things we shouldn't do. Most of my initial education came from Dorian Yates, and it was the value of big, heavy basics, progressive overload, and that's all very sensible advice. For some of you, that'll be Arnold, the higher volumes, and Arnold also stayed in pretty decent shape year round. For others, might be Lee Haney. His whole thing was higher volumes and stimulate, don't annihilate, so he didn't believe in going to failure that often. And then, of course, for the younger guys, it might be Jay Cutler, who's still around now. He did an amazing 50-year-old transformation recently. And for him, it was always very similar to Lee Haney, staying away from failure, doing higher volumes, and he looks good today. So going back to Serge, what I really liked about Serge was two things, really. One, his ability to stay in shape year round. But two, his ability to stay in shape even to the point where he was much older. He was looking good and being active well into his old age. What I see now in terms of motivations for younger guys coming to train is a little bit different to what we had 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there was a much larger emphasis, I think, on being as big as possible, as strong as possible. That was always my thing. I wanted to be as strong as I possibly could. Nowadays, when I talk to youngsters who are getting into training, they have different perspectives. A lot of them are actually more interested in health and longevity, even at a younger age, and mixing that alongside a good body, which was completely different to what I experienced earlier on in life, like in my 20s. I think back then, partly because bodybuilding was a much more underground movement, and the guys who were interested in bodybuilding and powerlifting were much more hardcore about the whole thing, whereas now it's much more mainstream. So you have people who are straddling both goals, which is a good thing. And that was something which was evident throughout all those golden era guys. Sure, they got a bit smaller, but they never really got completely out of shape and just horrendously big and fat like some of the modern guys do. And I think it pointed to this idea of consistency throughout the year. Do people look like bodybuilders? Do you look like a bodybuilder if you're spending a large portion of your year in the gym, hopefully also eating right and training well? Can people tell you lift most of the year, or do you just look like a fat ass if you've got a t-shirt on? So I like that idea, and I think it's good for not only your health, but also for, I think, for your ego. Not only for your health, but I think it's just also a great thing. Who doesn't want to be in reasonable shape year round, rather than just being in great shape for 1 week out of the year and then just letting it all go afterwards? I think consistency is a big part of that. Do people stay in good shape, not only throughout the year, but also throughout their lives? With stories of bodybuilders with different approaches to training and nutrition, and they end up completely falling off later in their lives, either through tremendous injuries, which some would consider to be self-inflicted, or drug-inflicted harm. Obviously, genetics play a role in this as well, and that's something we can't change. But what we're talking about today is what can we learn from elite bodybuilders? Now, I think the big thing to bear in mind is bodybuilding isn't powerlifting. It's not taking huge risks with weight which are out of your control and you have to cheat and squirm and things which are harmful to you. Like, just looking around social media, I can see guys who are older and who still insist on swinging and cheating weights, and inevitably they're getting injured. I'm thinking to myself, what are we doing here? What is the purpose? Like, surely the purpose should be to stay in the gym. Surely the purpose at any age, but especially when you're older, should be to train in a way in which you could stay in the gym and not be sidelined by injury. Alex Leonidas made a great video recently talking about the one major factor which is going to prevent you from gaining, and it's injuries. And I think that's definitely true, especially when you're older. All of your training should be funneled towards things which are going to keep you in the gym, because that's the main thing. No matter what you do, don't stop training. Stay training. Whether you're young, whether you're old, stay in the gym. It'll be the best thing you ever do. And I think when it comes to lifting, you've got to remember, bodybuilding is, for the most part, a lot safer. Lifting things in a controlled way, not handling weights which are way out of your control, which you can only do if you're squirming and cheating and swinging the weight up. Inevitably, I see some of these older guys on social media, just a cursory glance will show you most of them have injuries which prevent them from lifting. Like, we all pick up injuries, it's life, right? But injuries which actually prevent you from lifting and which are regularly occurring. So every few months are the elbow, the knee, the shoulder, and they persist on still swinging and cheating and squirming. And I just think to myself, why? What's the point? What are we trying to prove at this age? Why not just use weights you can control and get passionate about being in the gym and lifting with a bit of style, with a bit of intensity, rather than swinging the weights round like a baboon? It makes no sense. So that's the first thing. I think the first thing is, the first lesson we can learn from some of these elite bodybuilders, the ones who stay in shape throughout not only the year, but throughout their entire lives, is that bodybuilding isn't powerlifting. It's not supposed to be, right? It has a shelf life. The majority of powerlifters that I know who I came up with, they've mostly stopped powerlifting at this stage when they're into their 40s. You've just started to do bodybuilding style workouts so they can stay in shape and stay in the gym. And that's the sensible route. The first lesson I think we can learn from these elite bodybuilders, the ones who do things right, is to train in a way which allows you to stay in the gym and not get sidelined. And I think the second lesson we can learn is that bodybuilding at its heart is exercise. It's not just muscle building. Exercise is good. You should be looking to do some exercise every single day. If your exercise is simply going to the gym and doing a good long workout, you've done so much for your health already. Sure, add some steps, try and get 8,000 steps, but if you're just training every day with high volume routines, you're doing good. Just like Serge trained with a higher level of volume every day. That was his cardio. He liked to train, he liked to be in the gym. Great. Could he have gotten the same results if he had added in some running? Sure, maybe, sure. But the point is, bodybuilding is exercise. And at its heart, exercise is good for you. Don't just think of bodybuilding as muscle building. And it's quite interesting because I released a video recently on HIIT training. And there was one comment which stuck out in particular to me because it came later on. And it was a guy talking about how HIIT training was efficient. They said, yeah, at my age, I've got better things to do than spend hours and hours in the gym. And it just so happened this guy had a public profile. So I looked at him. He said he was 61 years old and he was clearly about 50 to 70 pounds overweight, maybe 100 pounds. And I'm thinking to myself, surely at your age, you shouldn't be looking for ways to do less exercise. He said he's got better things to do than train for hours and hours a week. What else would you have to do apart from take care of your body, take care of your health? What else is more important than that? I didn't understand that comment. Yeah, I just think it's a bit mad. So I think the second lesson is just to remember that bodybuilding isn't just about muscle building. You don't have to just do the most optimum routine to build muscle. You can learn from some of these guys who did a slightly different take on what was optimal, and it led to better health, and it led to better health and longevity in both the short and the long term. And I think the number of situations where somebody should be looking to do less exercise is very, very small. Perhaps if you're just an exercise addict and your doctor has told you to cut back, but that's not most of us. For most of us, if you're a regular guy training most days per week, it's good. And I personally find training, going to the gym, it helps to settle in my routine. It's part of my routine. I like to do something every day because it's part of my routine. The only day that I don't exercise in the week is a Saturday. Saturday is my complete chill out day. Just relax, do nothing. Literally nothing. But the rest of the week, I train and I work and I have a whole big routine set up, and it's part of it. It helps me to stay on my diet. It helps me to stay mentally in shape. It's good for you. Days and days away from the gym isn't good. So just to round this off, just to conclude, I think when looking at your training, we're looking at how you should train and what we can learn from these elite bodybuilders. I think you shouldn't let what's optimal for muscle building get in the way of adding in maybe a little bit to improve your health. I think that's fine. Most people will acknowledge that you can do some running, you can do some swimming, and you can do that alongside your training. Well, why not just a little bit more training? That's okay as well. Not everything has to be completely optimal for muscle building. We're not just here to build muscle. We're here to have good, healthy, long lives. and there's nothing wrong with a bit of extra training, and that's one of the things I think we really can learn. I also think when looking at the risk to reward ratio of training, I think it's important to try and minimize the risk and maximize the reward. Minimize the things which are going to be more risky and maximize the things which are going to give you the rewards that you want. And again, that's not just muscle building, but it's also excellent, robust health as well. I think there's lots we can learn from elite bodybuilders, whether that's what to do, whether that's what not to do. You've got to remember, these are essentially celebrities in our industry. And while we look at the entire breadth of their lives and what they were able to do and what they weren't able to do, we can learn lessons from that. Some of them are sad lessons. Some of them are really positive lessons. And I think when you've got a guy like Arnold, when you've got a guy like Stallone, when you've got a guy like Jay Cutler, got all these guys who are at various stages of their life, and not only are they still alive, but they're still alive and prospering and doing well. I think it's worthwhile listening to what they had to say and learning about what they did. I think that's very crucial. And conversely, when you have guys who aren't doing so well later in life, who've maybe had to give up training, or maybe they got burnt out, I think it's also important to look at what they did and maybe try and think, okay, let's think twice about that. Right, folks, I'm going to call it there. Hopefully that was useful to you. Speak to you in the next one. Peace out.